Before we dive in, before we get too far into it, let's take a quick trip down memory lane. What was your first laptop? Your first programming language? Your first phone with a keyboard? What were some of those things? These are mine. That Compaq was an Armada black and white laptop, sounded like a jet engine, but it was great. It got me online. It gave me that first spark of inspiration and some of the opportunities and some of the potential of what I could do with technology. Speaking of spark, I'd like everyone to raise your hands in the air. I know it's after lunch, big stretch. Raise your hands in the air. Everybody, come on, hands up, hands up, hands up. Thank you. This is the first Tech Industry Forum at Data and AI Summit ever. And you all are here. Thank you. First Tech Industry Forum. Huge deal. Now, we're going to do hands again, but I would love to see some hands in the air if you've been to 5 or more Data and AI Summits. You know when they used to be called Spark Summits. Kyle, hand in the air. Shelby, hand in the air. You've been to more than 5 Data and AI Summits. Okay? Got a couple people over there, some new people here. If you've been to more than 10, leave your hands in the air. Jason, you said you might have been to, yeah, okay. So you've got some deep knowledge in the front here that I'm so excited to share with you in the rest of this session. My name is Madelyn Mullen. I am the industry marketing leader for our digital natives customers here at Databricks. This hour, I'm going to be the MC, guide you through what it means to be tip of the spear in data and AI. On behalf of our sponsors, Aimpoint and AWS, and everybody else you're meeting down at the expo, thank you so much for sponsoring this session today. Definitely check them out down at Expo. And for Aimpoint, last night, they won Digital Native Partner of the Year, second time in a row. So if you haven't worked with Aimpoint, highly recommend that. Today is not just about technology. We also are thinking about the people in the room, the people on your teams, the folks you work with at your customers and client and partner accounts. And as you're doing that, we're looking to solve some of the toughest problems in tech. How do we unify data and AI? How do we democratize data in organizations? And what does it mean to do that in a way that is open, that is portable, that is following governance standards that are so important to all of us? So you're going to hear from our different groups today. First, we're going to welcome up to the stage Jason. Then Jason's going to welcome up to the stage a panel discussion. We'll have Dan from Zillow tell us a little bit about what's going on over there, and Shant will close. After this forum, there are 9 other forums you are able to join around the hall, from financial services to retail to public sector and a lot of other industries. So feel free to check those out. Come back at 5 p.m. We're going to have a reception on the landing before you head down the escalators. Without further ado, I would love to welcome to the stage Jason Reid.
Appreciate the intro. Welcome, everybody. Glad to be here. First one, as Madelyn mentioned, is pretty exciting for us, exciting for me. So I'm Jason Reid. I'm a director of product here at Databricks. I primarily oversee all things Lakehouse. So that's your storage layers, your Delta Lakes, your icebergs, things like Unity Catalog as well. This is not my first Data and AI Summit. It's my second one as a Databricks employee, although I came to many before that, before I was a Databricks employee. But last year was a special one for me. I came to Databricks by way of the Tabular acquisition, where I was a co-founder. So that was a big announcement. Databricks last year acquires Tabular. We were an Apache Iceberg-based sort of Lakehouse solution. And we spent the last year at Databricks integrating all that goodness into the Databricks proper platform. There's lots of sessions this week all about that. I'm not going to talk about it today, but there are plenty of opportunities to learn about it, keynotes and other things. So excited about all those announcements. But today, for this group, I wanted to spend some time this is like tip of the spear for data and AI. And I talked to probably a lot of you are in this audience today over the course of the last year, or at least people from your companies and your industries. And for me, I said, well, what's like the big theme of all these conversations that I have across the Databricks customer base? What's the one thing that stands out? And I'm not going to say AI or agents. That might have been the easy guesses. The word I hear more than any other word in my conversations with customers is Interoperability. That's the thing that people come to me with. So for all of our fancy AI, interoperability seems to be the thing that many, many companies are struggling with, and it's really sort of been at the forefront of the conversations I've been having. And so I was thinking about this, and for the purpose of this session, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about why. Like, why is it that that's the thing that I want to go to all these customers, like that's the key thing that they're talking about? What is it that we add all this complexity to our environments? Like, because interoperability is like, it's complexity. There's lots of rough edges when we're trying to connect two different systems together, right? We talk about data being the foundations. We want to do all this cool stuff with AI, and honestly, we just can't even get like Databricks and Snowflake to talk to each other. Like, these are like basic problems, foundational things we're trying to do in our data infrastructure, and now we're struggling with it. And why was that? And I thought about my own experiences. So prior to the startup, I had spent a lot of years at Netflix, at the data engineering, data platform teams at Netflix. And we had the same problems. We were trying to do interoperability. That's how we ended up with Apache Iceberg. But I was thinking, like, fundamentally, like, why was it that we had so many different technologies in our stack that forced us to have these difficult conversations? And I think it's the classic answer to all data questions, and that is, it depends. It depends. Everybody's answers are a little bit different, but the reason it depends actually is because we have lots of different users of data in our businesses, right? We have our classic personas, our data engineers and our analysts and scientists, but then we have much more people beyond that, and as our data lakes and our lake houses expand, we're bringing more and more people from our organizations into this world of data and trying to help them use data in their day-to-day jobs. But the reality is all of those people have very different needs of our data. They have different skill sets, they speak different languages, they want different tools. And this is what like ultimately underpins this interoperability question, is that we have to meet these users where they are. We have to bring them tool sets that they feel comfortable with. And then of course we need all those tool sets to interact, hopefully, ideally, sort of the promise of the lakehouse architecture is that we get all of these tools to interact on a single source of truth data. That's where the interoperability challenge comes from. We don't want to make copies of all of our data. It's a really valuable asset. We want to make sure it's well governed. We want to make sure it scales well. But we want to be able to have different tools, different modalities for the different personas within our organizations so they can get their jobs done effectively. And that leads to these interoperability conversations that I have all the time. And this has also led to sort of what I would call the lakehouse remodel. So like many of you in this room are sort of, I think, pushing the boundaries of the original patterns around the lakehouse and forcing us to like really evolve like how we bring this concept, this architectural concept of lakehouse to industries, and then to tech industries like yours. And it starts with the fact that I mentioned we have a variety of different tools, different personas, different modalities of compute that we want to bring to our data. And that can be from ingestion, and there's many different tools we have around ingestion. Obviously, Databricks provides some fantastic ingestion tools, things like Lakeflow Connect and others that you'll hear more about this week. But we have streaming data coming in from Kafka. We're maybe using Fivetran to bring in data from our long tail of SaaS providers, et cetera. And this sort of challenge goes on and on through transformations and data warehousing, dashboarding, and now obviously all of our Gen AI and ML use cases. Right? We want all this on the same source of truth data. And so that data needs to be interoperable, right? Interoperability, here it is again. And we've mostly solved this through the use of open table formats. So things like Delta Lake and Apache Iceberg. That's obviously why I'm here up on this stage today. This is like where I spend a lot of my time. That's really important. And then the last thing is, how do we stitch that stuff together? How do we take all those compute modalities? So we have open source data, we have open formats, we have interoperability, but we need that catalog. We need governance. We need to be able to make sure that only the right users have access to the right. And we can connect all these things together. And not just our tabular data. This goes for our unstructured data as well, our documents and our texts and our videos, all the more important in the AI apps that we're all building. All right, so this is sort of like the new lakehouse, the lakehouse remodel as I'll call it. And this is where I think the most advanced customers that I see in industry, they're employing a combination of things on the screen in really unique ways. But it doesn't stop there. That's sort of still not the end of interoperability. Like, that's great. We have a catalog and we have storage and we have all these tools. But the reality is every single customer I talk to, they have the world beyond Databricks, right? And beyond just the tools that I showed on the last slide. They've got data in other catalogs. They've got old data in Hive, or they've got data in Snowflake, or maybe they've got data in their cloud provider like Glue. They have data in their providers, things like Salesforce and SAP. All that also needs to come in and interoperate in this ecosystem. right? So we've got things like catalog federation, what allows us to take Unity catalog governance and lineage and express it on top of additional catalogs and data outside of our normal Databricks environment. And we can use things like delta sharing to make sure that that data can interoperate, not just within our own organizations. Now we need that data to interoperate across companies, right? We've got to share with partners and customers. More of the conversations I'm in are like, okay, I have these data sets, but I need these data sets or parts of these data sets to go to these customers or these partners. How can I do that without making copies, without shipping copies around? How do I have more control over this stuff? So that's sort of one of the themes that I see. Just wanted to share all that with you today. You're going to hear more about it this week, I'm sure. And with that, I would like to welcome our panel up to the stage. So I have Josh and Dev and Dan joining me today. Come on up, guys. All right. Thank you all for joining me today. Appreciate it. We're going to do a quick round of introductions, so maybe we'll just start left to right. Josh, you want to go ahead and start? Sure thing. Yeah, the one guy without the mic.
Hey, everybody. I'm Josh from Dropbox. I'm on the engineering side right now. I'm responsible for all of AI engineering at Dropbox, as well as, here we go. All right, now I got the mic. Again, this is Josh here from Dropbox, in charge of AI engineering at Dropbox. And in particular, we're building a brand new product. It's recent, about 9 months we launched, called Dropbox Dash. It is our new way of imagining how enterprise search, universal search should work for knowledge workers.
Awesome, thank you. I'm Dave. I support the data ML and AI groups at Robinhood. My work is primarily focused on getting to better internal productivity by way of machine learning models and agents, and rolling out agentic first or AI first experiences to external users by the intersection of data ML and AI.
Awesome. And I'm Dan DeMeyere. I'm the Chief Product and Technology Officer at ThredUp, responsible for data science, engineering, product management, and we've been deploying generative AI to consumers for about 18 months, so a lot of learnings from that.
Yeah, like I said, you all are up here, I think, hopefully to share some of the wisdom that you've garnered and all these initiatives you just talked about with the group here is also, I'm sure have their own initiatives very similar that they're trying to unroll at their company. So Josh, I'll start with you, and we'll start with the sort of the infrastructure architecture choices. Maybe just share some what's going on in Dropbox that has enabled you all to be so advanced in your modernization activities.
Yeah, absolutely. Real-time analytics and data, it's essential for any kind of product innovation. And this is something that Dropbox learned quite many years ago. Obviously, many of us know us from storage. One of our key kind of technical initiatives was a platform called Magic Pocket. And this was our in-house multi-exabyte storage platform. And with that, you really learn how important it is to control the reliability, the overall performance, and frankly, just being able to handle that kind of throughput at scale. And a lot of that has translated into now the world of AI. Everybody wants access to more and more powerful tools, more and more powerful models. You have to have the data, it's essential. And that is really the core beliefs and rationale behind Dropbox Dash. Show of hands, who has too many SaaS apps at work? All right. It looks like everybody just has just enough. We're just completely overwhelmed with content out there. There's unstructured data, and it's over there in Jira, it's in Google Docs, and frankly, it's overwhelming. And so at Dropbox, we actually are using Databricks as a kind of a key cornerstone of how we decide how to process that information. So let me give you a quick kind of overview of how Dash works. We will connect to dozens of third-party apps. We are ingesting content, passing that through Kafka queues, and we have to process information. We have to store it. For simple things like documents, we can easily chunk it and index it and then serve it for our users. But there's a lot of content out there, like Teams data, Slack data. It's very complicated. I can't just listen to a fire hose of content like that, and it'll completely overwhelm our index. And so we're using Databricks. We're creating all these Spark jobs to process this content. And we effectively need a staging environment. We've been using Databricks and their graph frames technology to build effectively a knowledge graph so we can enrich this information. So imagine we ingest a calendar information. We can then pull in people. We can then pull in potential transcripts from your last conversation, docs that were attached, and create a far more intelligent data set that then we index and we can serve to our users. So Databricks has been a huge part of our solution.
That's fantastic. I swear the conversation I had is out there somewhere. I don't remember which medium I had it in. It was Slack or email, or maybe it was in a document somewhere, right? And this is like this challenge that we're solving, which I'm excited about. I'm going to switch gears from sort of the infrastructure questions, and this is a question for all three of you, and Deb, I'll start with you, which is more of an organizational structure. How have you structured your people, your teams in your organization to take advantage of these shifts that are going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me answer it in like a few layers. So we have the team structure or the organizational aspect that roughly mimics how data flows through our subsystems, and that roughly mimics to the broader conceptual subsystems. Concretely, the team structure we have is roughly like data engineers, machine learning engineers. MLEs are split between sort of like applied MLEs as well as like platform engineers. Or ML infra engineers, you have data infra engineers, and then you have the larger product teams, right? Before going into like the conceptual subsystems, I really want to capture how our data flow looks like, roughly speaking. So you have your microservices that trigger a bunch of events that may land in an operational data store. Like, you buy a stock or you want to place an order that triggers an update in some operational data store. Similarly, while you're doing those actions, that triggers an analytics event that could land in a data warehouse or a data lake. Really. The bridge between these is through Kafka that goes to consumed by Flink, populates the data lake, and then we have a data access layer, which conceptually you could think of as like a GraphQL-esque shim that sits across all of our services. And then this essentially feeds into either our machine learning models, analytical queries and dashboards downstream, or it goes to knowledge retrieval by agents or for AI type use cases. And eventually, that could also result in some notion of inference by loading all of that data into context. This then maps to conceptual subsystems, which you could roughly say are like data ingestion. Primarily, the persona, the role there would be a data engineer or a data platform engineer doing it. Then we have essentially like feature engineering, again, cuts between some data science, data engineering type of personas. You have your ML training, model registration, feature surveying, ML scoring and inference, experimentation, and then model monitoring. As these subsystems, now you go from left to right, from like data engineering, data science, to machine learning, so on and so forth, eventually to consumers of the subsystems, which are product engineers. So we are roughly organizing the flow and the personas that map to it in that sense. Idea really is like separation of concerns, optimized for reusability and velocity. What I wanted to cover, one more thing, was like what we don't have. I think we're working quite decidedly towards continuous model retraining. That's one aspect that we're still building towards.
Yeah, so it sounds like you organized very much in the workflow, right? You organized, structurally, organizationally around the business workflow, right, of delivering these data products. And then maybe Dan, for you, same question, but also how do you think about sort of centralized versus decentralized hub and spoke models? What is in a core team versus what is happening closer to the business?
Yeah, good question. So we have our data engineers embedded on all of the cross-functional teams. So they're working alongside product engineers, data scientists, product managers. And we found this works really well for two reasons. One is that you get technical alignment like right out of the gate, right? The data engineers, they know the platform, they know the capabilities with Databricks, and so they can really inform the solution space and be there with everyone else. But then the other benefit of this is that you have like the resource autonomy. So we're not having to wait for some data engineering backlog, check in with a data engineering manager of like, when can we get so-and-so's time? They're there making it happen. So we get technical alignment, we get resource autonomy, so we're moving really fast. The downside to that is that you can sometimes silo some innovation. And so we try to combat that in two ways. One is that we have a monthly technology all hands, and that's just sharing the high level learnings, like what technology we're working with, what's working, what's not working. And then we do monthly hackathons, and we actually carve off like almost a week a month for all of the engineers and data scientists to get their hands dirty on like what other models have been developed outside of their kind of like close team. And it's our way to sort of cross-pollinate the tech And especially with like how fast tech is moving, we've been developing all these what we call like AI atomic building blocks into our architecture. And so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, independent of the rest of the team. You can kind of learn. And so we're moving fast, but we're aligned technically, and we're also having that sort of like team-wide awareness.
Yes, a lot of knowledge sharing, certainly across the function. What about like how do you avoid duplicating actual data assets, right, across when you have your data engineers spread across product teams?
That's a good question. So we invested heavily into Unity Catalog and being really mindful of like what data goes into the lake, and then the data team itself has their own guild. So they, even though they're embedded in the team and they are sort of like working independently of each other, there is coherence when it comes to if we're adding new things to the lake, if we want to replicate it or copy it somewhere else, they have their own way of sort of maintaining sanity and preventing the sort of like decentralization of all of that.
Nice, data guilds, I like it. Josh, same question for you. Anything you'd add on?
So we do follow a lot of the similar practices at Dropbox. Maybe I'll focus a little bit more on the Gen AI use case. Many of you probably have a chatbot at your company. We do too. And the key for us is to structure our teams and process so that there's a really nice flywheel. Imagine, users start to engage with your product. That creates question-answer pairs or, prompt response pairs. You take that information, you can then curate it. You can decide, should this be part of an eval set? You start to build much more of that kind of robust eval set around accuracy, relevance, instruction following, conciseness, a bunch of other attributes you care about. That then goes into your experimentation platform. You can now have your teams thinking about, how do I iterate on prompts? How can I potentially fine tune if my customer data allows that? How can I potentially just bring in models from off the shelf and see how they do against this evaluation set? Ultimately, your models now get better. You publish that into production. More users engage with the product, and it continues that flywheel. So having that set up, I think, is really essential for us and for all companies.
Yeah, I love that. Something to try and emulate for sure. Easier said than done, so good for you. I'll switch gears a little bit now and talk about, all of what we've all been talking about, even what I talked about in my opening was, how do we, get more people in the organization involved in the process, right? So we can, really accelerate. There's so many use cases across the business where we want to try to employ these data techniques. So what I want to ask is, how do you know if you're being successful? What are the criteria? What are the KPIs and measurements that you use to say like, yeah, we're succeeding in our goal of getting more and more of the organization involved?
That's a great question. So I would say like Robinhood is a fintech company. We have real, assets with us in terms of money, in terms of equities, what have you. So we are at a baseline governance first. We invest heavily in lineage. We invest heavily in auditability, audit logs, holistic access control, data tagging, so on and so forth. And that doesn't limit to just data access for like, analytical use cases. That extends into what you can leverage for model training, that extends into how agents are interfacing with either online or offline data sets, features as well, all the way up onto, eventually allowing or disallowing a particular model to even be trained. So we sort of have like a traffic signal model for governance where green means all the way up to the source of the data. If it's green to use, you can use it. For training, you can't even experiment with it if it's not green. If it's yellow, make it green. If it's red, stop. Make it yellow first, make it green, right? So that's sort of like the baseline I want to start with. So for a fintech company in general, I would make the statement that governance is more important than adoption internally, right? So with that baseline, what we track in terms of adoption metrics are weekly active users. We're roughly like 1,600 people weekly actives out of, I want to say, roughly 2,100 people company. Time to insights is an important metric we follow, especially for sort of some of the strict SLO-centric jobs, think clearing and stuff like that, end-of-day reconciliations type of thing. Usually these are bad jobs, 15-minute SLAs. They keep on running in short batches. Stuff like, again, tying back into governance, let's call it like GDPR masking type jobs. They are also at a 15-minute cadence, and then we have like a whole swath of real-time jobs or real-time streaming applications that we run. Usually the latencies there are sub 1 minute, if not even lower. For feature generation, it's under 5 minutes for offline features and under 1 minute for online features. So yeah, that's roughly what we track across batch streaming and governance.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought governance in, because like there's this balance. Like governance is obviously really, really important, especially as we're democratizing access, right? How do we balance those two things? With that lens, Dan, I'll turn to you. You were quoted in the Wall Street Journal for like the number of different teams within your company that are leveraging Databricks. And look, selfishly, I would love all the companies in this room to be able to follow your model. So yeah, please help me help them.
Yeah, so when we integrate with Databricks, obviously the data engineers are going to be like the first people who are singing its praises. And then we had a very small team of data scientists that were focused on what we call marketplace optimization. They control all of the levers in our marketplace with like pricing, promotions. These are like very powerful levers from like a unit economic standpoint. And so when they have a big win, it can generate millions of dollars. And so when they got in there, and they were not only using it for insights and dashboards, but they're building models, and they have multi-arm bandit experiments that are going live every single day, and they're generating wins. It started to create this like very nice awareness of like, hey, like what are they doing? How is it different from everything that we've done historically? And that was sort of like the little snowball that we started and just kind of pushed it downhill. Because anyone else, it didn't even have to be a data scientist, started being software engineers, and then some tech-savvy business stakeholders started getting involved, and they wanted to understand like Databricks and how do I leverage it to do my job more effectively and make an impact. So that was the organic momentum. And once that started, then we sort of invested into it from a company-wide standpoint. So we did a 12-week AI bootcamp about a year ago, and that was to kind of demystify generative AI, try to get everyone on the same level playing ground when it comes to what it is and what are some of the tools and capabilities at everyone's disposal. And then we did this big investment from an engineering standpoint where anyone in the company from like a VP of marketing to a customer service specialist, we had these workshops where they could come and they could say like, hey, this is like my slice of the business. These are the kind of questions I'm trying to answer on a daily basis. Like help me to understand like what Databricks can do to make progress in my role. And so we kind of hit it from all angles. There was sort of the organic momentum that started small, and then we had the sort of like the company-wide awareness of like what it was and what's possible with it. But then we kind of went in surgically to like every part and started saying like, hey, like how do we weave this into like your day-to-day job, trying to move closer and closer to not only democratizing access to the data, but really like self-service, everything that you would sort of need from a data perspective for your role.
That sounds like a little internal go-to-market machine, right? I hear all the right things, like organic and then surgical. Like whose responsibility within the organization? Who was really driving, especially when you started talking about workshops? Was it the early wins that sort of woke the company up to say like, hey, we should invest in getting more people. We want more of these wins. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it comes down to, in our culture, we're very data driven, and, being able to like influence outcomes is like very, very important. And so like the key people who were doing that like week in and week out were all doing it through Databricks in a number of ways. So that was, I think, a pretty big part of it. But I think the data engineering team was also very outspoken, and they were kind of helping to get momentum within engineering. And then we have sort of like the KPIs that we look at, it's probably unconventional. So we know we're making progress in democratizing data if the business can scale in a nonlinear way relative to like an analyst headcount, from like a SG&A perspective. So if the business is growing by 25% and every year you're hiring 25% more analysts, then you're not really doing anything to like make the company self-service their data needs. And so if we can grow the business by 25% and analyst headcount grows by 5%, or maybe it's flat, it's a nonlinear relationship, we're making progress. And part of this is like, when stakeholders can get their own A/B test analyses done, through Databricks in an automated fashion. But then that's great for them. They can move faster, make decisions faster. But then what we found is the backlogs for our analysts, for our data scientists, is shifted away from sort of like the monotonous, like, can I have this insight, can I have this report, and more towards strategic work, which is like what they like to do as well. So we kind of look at that every single year, and that's sort of like our KPI, which is probably a little bit weird to understand like how well are we doing with data democratization.
I love that KPI. It's like, hey, our business can grow without our headcount also having to grow linearly with the size of our business. I think that's a fantastic KPI. And as somebody who used to run data engineering teams, I really appreciate not being the inflow of just like, can I have this pipeline? Can I have this table? Like data engineering teams don't love those, and then tickets back up, and that's sort of like it can be a spiral the wrong way. So you've got a spiral in the right direction. The flywheel effect seems to be working, which is great. Josh, I mean, a sort of similar question to you. We were talking earlier about the the migration to Databricks at Dropbox, and has been, very successful. You guys are almost all the way there, almost 100% of the stuff running there. Maybe just anything like looking back on that whole process. A lot of the people in this room are going through similar migration efforts. Any words of wisdom to share?
I think the key for us was really trying to simplify the workloads. We were using just a myriad of different technologies, and it makes it hard. You were talking about interoperability before. The data is living in different silos, and so when it comes to things like introducing better governance, you're now having to duplicate that across for all the different technologies you might be using. And so when we started to work with Databricks back in 2022, it was very easy, very natural to start to bring as many workloads as we could onto the Databricks platform. And we're still doing that right now. A lot of our machine learning workflows still are done in a very custom way, Jupyter Notebooks, where we're actively looking at bringing it over to Databricks Notebooks. And we'll continue to go down that journey since it's been very successful and it is very easy to use. And like I said before with Dash, we found other novel ways of leveraging this technology, really making sense and building more intelligent derived data sets on top of all the different kind of content that's coming in. And it's very easy to use, a very easy platform for us to experiment and try new data sets. It's been very effective for us overall.
Awesome. All right, well, we're wrapping up on time here a little bit, so final toss-up question for all of you, anybody who wants to jump in and answer. Any final takeaways or piece of advice you would give to this audience, sort of looking to follow in your footsteps, sort of lead at the tip of the spear, as we're calling it in data and AI?
I can go first. Yeah, I think I would definitely recommend don't try to do everything all at once. I think try to find a use case and a team that is probably like one of your stronger teams, more advanced teams, and start there, snowball it, and then sort of let it kind of speak for itself. And then you get that very organic gravity towards Databricks and deploying AI in production, and then kind of the rest takes care of itself.
I love that.
I'll go with, you can't fix what you don't measure. So really start to think about what does success look like? What are the measurements you're doing? If you're doing that migration, how do you know if it's successful or not? And specifically on the Gen AI side, evals, channeling, my Steve Ballmer here. Really, really essential to get that right. You have to do it for your own company data too. Don't just rely on the public benchmarks. You have to really understand your own company and team's unique data sets, build those evals so you know if you're actually improving or not.
Yeah, similar answer, I would say. Think migration first. Know your North Star, think migration first, and then work backwards from there. Be small, incremental, ship frequently. And remember, AI's foundation is really data. You need to have, clean data. You need to have easily available, discoverable data. So don't ignore data in the pursuit of AI.
Awesome. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you all very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, panelists, giving us a glimpse of what's going on in their organizations. I think there's a lot more to know, so find them at the reception coming up at 5 o'clock today. But now, standing next to me, I've got Dan. Dan has a fantastic story he's going to share with us of what's going on with Databricks at Zillow. Thanks, Dan.
All right, yeah, happy to be here. Let's see if this slide works. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I know it's probably been a jam-packed day for all of you. We're nearing the end of the session. So definitely thank you for your time. Thanks for the attention. I'll do everything I can in the next 12, 13 minutes to make sure you walk away with something interesting about Databricks, Zillow, and what we're doing. In terms of what I'm going to cover, first I want to give a bit of a story around how we think about data at Zillow. And then I want to talk about the actual business challenges that we're working on. And then we get to how it comes together. So my team, we focus on the data platform, among some other pieces, and a big part of that story is how are we evolving and building over time to help enable the business to keep up with where it needs to go, to make sure that we're ready to act on technology like generative AI and so on. And then I'll end with an example that's actually going to tie a lot with some of the topics that we heard about in the panel around interoperability, self-service, and so on. All right, so just to start, data has been central to everything Zillow has done over its full journey, really. And if you go from the co-founders down to the ICs in the organization, everybody cares about data. My team, we get a lot of service tickets and requests coming in, and if I were to pull that up for you, you would find the name of one of our co-founders on that list. So I got the receipts to prove it. Truly, like everybody from co-founder to IC engaged in data in the company. And if I were to ask you, think about Zillow, what are some data-driven products that make us successful? You probably would say either Zestimate or property listings and just the general data that we have. So it's been very foundational for everything that we've done as a company and our growth over time. And then zooming forward to where we are now, we're leaning very heavily into the Gen AI space, both from unlocking efficiencies within the company perspective to building out innovative experiences that face our different users. So that's the data side of the house. And then if we move to the actual business side of the house, so like what do we care about solving from the Zillow point of view? Point of this slide is moving is complicated and expensive, right? So like it would literally take me my whole time, if not more, just to give you a general overview of what the heck is going on here. So that is the takeaway you should be getting from the slide. Whether you're the person buying the house, renting, the agent working with them, there are all sorts of processes. They connect in ways that are not necessarily obvious, super complicated. You go through this thing once or twice in your life. It's just so emotional and it's really tough, right? So from Zillow's perspective, if we're able to simplify that, we're able to create a lot of value for a lot of people. So that's what we're trying to solve. And one of the ways we talk about our solution to that problem is the housing super app. And kind of way to think about it is we own solutions at different points of that journey, at that really complicated journey. So to the extent we're able to pull them together and integrate them, make them interoperable, we can start removing pain for our users. So a simple example, imagine you're browsing for a home and you want to get a mortgage. How do we make that process easy? That's the concept of the super app. And again, I don't have enough time to give you all the details, but when you look at the last few years of Zillow performance, we've been outperforming the general housing market by a good margin. And a big part of that story is this approach around integration, interoperability. So how it all comes together, and this is where my team fits in the picture, we care a lot about data, and we want to have a user experience that's a lot more integrated over time. So we view our data platform as being foundational to helping enable that at the end of the day. So if you were to go back 2 years in time, or probably maybe a little bit more than that, and you looked at our different data platforms, it was fragmented. We were using all sorts of technologies, all sorts of different platforms, and man, if you were in one part of the business and you wanted to understand what your users were doing in another part of the business, that would have taken you months. So obviously very painful, very much a barrier to getting to that housing super app story. So internally, when we talk about what our team is doing and what our mission is, a big part of it's breaking down silos. We want to make it easy if you're in one part of the organization to understand what's going on in the other one from a data perspective, and we want to make it self-service. One thing I tell my team a lot too is a great outcome is if our users don't have to talk to us. We want to talk to them, we like talking to them, but if they're able to self-serve and do what they need to do on their own, that means that our platform is giving them what they want, and it's a good thing. The other aspect too, just to paint the picture of how Databricks fits into the story. So, when I talk about data platform at Zillow, that covers the production side of the house. So everything from eventing, we do a whole bunch of GraphQL, through the analytical ecosystem, or big chunks of the analytical ecosystem. And we're very much building that around the Databricks set of tools and products. So when we talk about the housing super app, it's this big thing. It's a thing you pay attention to. And in reality, too, there are a whole bunch of teams that are supporting it. So, if I were more accurate, I'd have a whole army of people holding it, but it's a data talk, so I just get to talk about the data platform team. But really, the thing that matters from the user perspective, or customer's perspective, it's the super app. Without our data platform team, it doesn't work. So I mentioned Databricks. That's really the cornerstone of what we're building on the analytical ecosystem side. And some of this is a little bit redundant, but really just to drive it home. What do we care about when we're building this thing out? we want a single pane experience, so interoperability, right? If you're in one part of the organization, we want to make it easy for you to understand what's going on in other parts of the org without having to do really complex joins and operations to make that happen. One thing I haven't mentioned yet, but it came up in the panel, is we care an awful lot about access control too. It's true for all parts of the business, and we certainly have specific parts of the business where we need to be extra aware of compliance and regulation and so on. So we want to do everything we can to be consistent with that, but to remove friction for our users. And then last but not least, self-service. I could spend another 20 minutes talking about how Databricks weaves in and out of this, but really just to highlight a few of the pieces that have been particularly important to us. Unity Catalog has been a big one from a discovery, just understanding that single pane of glass. Serverless compute has actually been quite a big deal. We're onboarding lots of different teams, so the concept of helping teams make the right trade-offs between cost and performance and doing that in a pretty self-sufficient way has been quite important for us. Notebooks, really important. There are half a dozen other things I could have put in here as well. But just giving a flavor of we're really weaving in the different parts of the Databricks offering into our analytics ecosystem. Okay, so I mentioned 2 years ago, we were in this state where the data was super siloed, super fragmented. We wanted to help support the housing super app to the extent that we could. We're 2 years later, so how is it going? And what I'm showing here, it's weekly active users, or average weekly active users by month, going back about 12 months. And what you're seeing is almost a 5x increase in the number of folks that have onboarded onto the analytical platform supported by Databricks. And I'm kicking myself for not including the few months before this, because what you would have seen is the curve almost going to zero. So really over the last year and a half, within Zillow, we've had this huge rush of users into this platform. And one of the beautiful things about it, when I've done migrations in the past, there's carrot and stick, sometimes a little more stick than carrot, if I'm being fully honest. But in this case, it's almost been the opposite. In all honesty, which is a real validation of the concept of single pane, self-service, good access control, really being attractive to folks. We've been constrained by our ability to support people onboarding into the platform. It's been much more that than anything else in terms of why we're not even further along. So then kind of unpacking it a little bit, okay, great. Onboarding a lot of folks, lots of demand, good stuff happening. How do we start creating a story around why people are finding value? The two things I'd call out, when you start scratching the surface and you ask, okay, for what's going well when you use the platform? When you ask people for whatever task you're doing now in the data platform, if it's making a dashboard or running a bunch of queries, whatever it is, now versus 2 years ago, we're finding 20% plus time savings for those sorts of things. So it's a very obvious, very significant impact. And the thing that kind of kills me about this is these are the kinds of efficiency gains that we hear a lot about on the Gen AI side. But frankly, we're seeing it by doing a lot of the kind of nitty-gritty data pipeline, self-service side of things. So not to criticize Gen AI, it's a massive story, a massive part of the story, but really want to highlight you still can't ignore the fundamentals, and there's still a lot of value in the fundamentals. So we're seeing that being captured. And I'm going to get into a bit of a vignette around some of the self-service opportunities, but general theme, and we're hearing this a lot, it's that concept of I don't want our customers to have to talk to us. We hear a lot of these examples now where my team's not directly involved, and we'll hear, man, we unblocked this thing we've been dying to do for the business for months or years or whatever it is, and teams are just able to do it. And here, I got to contextualize it a little bit. So Zillow is very precious about what I can or can't share. I would love to give you all the details on this particular business story, but I can't. I'll try to give you as much of the context so that you understand why I'm excited about it, though. And this is fresh off the presses, so I think it's about a month ago or so where we learned about it. But you can imagine, we basically had a pocket of the business where they had a very aggressive sales strategy that they wanted to implement and fully operationalize across a team of sales agents. And the key word there is operationalize. So kind of parsing that out. they thought it was really time constrained. They really said, hey, like, if we don't get this going in 2 weeks, we're not gonna get everything that we think we can get. Like, we either gotta do it in 2 weeks or we don't do it at all. And around operationalization, again, just think in practice. You have teams of sales agents, the individuals folks who are making the calls, making the deals. You have their managers who are trying to understand the higher level picture of what's going on. You need to enable them to do their job. And at the time, the team didn't even have these tools. They didn't have them accessible. And they did a very, like, I don't know, generous way of kind of depicting what they were planning on doing, where, again, it's interoperability, so like taking data from Unity Catalog, data that we had in Databricks, some external data, running a bunch of Python, and getting it to the sales folks. It's generous because, I think before they started actually working through the process, folks are probably worried. Again, like, this wasn't something we had been able to do before. So then how did it go? It was a success. I wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't a success. Maybe that's like another, talk or something. Things that go wrong in the data world. But this one worked, and the pieces that I'll call out, right? Okay, one-stop shop. I've said that sort of thing a lot. What was really neat, they were able to get tooling in the hands of sales agents that had calls to action that were personalized, discounts that were personalized, potential additional products to sell and so on, and all accessible for individual agents, which was amazing. And again, it was self-serve, QA enabled, meaning even the team that had built the dashboards didn't have to necessarily be in them. The sales folks could manage them all directly. And yeah, I mean, at this point, I mentioned we had we're precious around what we can share. I kind of feel like this is like a top secret, redacted dashboard or something. It's not government work, it's sales and real estate, but it is what it is. If you look at it really closely, really you could think of it, we have a bunch of different tabs that the team made where it was enabling different hierarchical views of the data, whether you're like the sales manager, the IC executing, and so on. And again, this was a team that didn't have to interact with us to build it. They did it in 2 weeks. They had a couple of data savvy folks in their group. For me, this was a huge success compared to where we were 2 years prior. So last stop for me, what's next, or what's now? Gen AI and its little brother, or little sibling, or whatever, AI, acceleration. And I could connect it a little bit to some of the talks there. I already mentioned, for us, Gen AI, hugely important. It's going to be a big thing, for us like everyone else. We'll leave you with one message about it, around how we think about it. The beautiful thing about Gen AI is if you want to really unlock it, you have to get your data in as high quality of a state as possible. So to be totally frank with you, the same things that you are doing and thinking about around serving data in dashboards to distributed users, making it self-serve and so on, those are all things that are actually incredibly helpful for getting your Gen AI to work really well. So that's how we think about it. We're going to keep along the same track. We're going to start folding in a lot of these types of solutions over time. And I got that version where maybe a year from now I do a version of this presentation and I can share we have the coder holding up the housing super app, but also the Gen AI robot. But that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for sharing with us where Zillow's been going. I think my sales leader might be calling you about that dashboard to get some insights. So our session has to come to an end. I know, it's been great. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to all of you. We have Shant to take us home to tell us not just what we need to do now, but what we need to start thinking about and get ready for.
Thanks, Madelyn. Hey everyone, I'm Shant. I'm from the engineering team at Databricks, and we're sort of going to talk a little bit about what's next at Databricks. So, most importantly, we've always really disrupted ourselves at Databricks because of all of you, like the users. So much of what we do and why we do it is driven by feedback from all of our users, our customers, and even ourselves internally. We're all users of our products, right? A lot of this started with Spark in the early days, and if you used Spark in the beginning, there's a few versions of it. I hated at the time waiting for code to compile and run before I could get errors. Spark was great. You had this REPL where you could actually iterate quickly and get instant feedback. Then we had the dataset APIs, data frame APIs. So much more came in that just made it faster and easier for people to get stuff done. Photon came in. It was another huge transformation in performance. Delta. Back in the day, you would actually have to prepare partitions, jump through all these hoops to just update data. And with Delta, you had those transactional abilities. You didn't have to do all this processing just to figure out all the data to update. And then Lakehouse came in recently, and this was really the idea that you can combine the AI and data lake environment together with the data warehousing environment. And of course, it was kind of the butt of a bunch of jokes when Lakehouse first came out 5 years ago. Is like, everyone is like, what is this thing? What is this word you made? It's kind of for dumb, lazy people. This is from Bill Inman, one of the original architects of data warehousing. But of course, later on, he saw the light. He kind of had a publication or two. And it wasn't just him. It was a bunch of other companies. Everyone started using Lakehouse. So while you can make fun of the name a little bit, it ended up being a huge disruptive shift in the industry. And since then, we heard about Unity Catalog quite a few times today. So that was really a whole new way of visiting the operational catalog. So transactions, metadata, all of it in one place and making it accessible to everybody. And more recently, data intelligence. I don't know about you, but every time I create a table, I still don't believe it. I want to put a partition by clause. I put cluster by auto. And I kind of go back and I check my data. I check the queries. I do a describe on it. And it's like that freaking thing always picks really good columns. It's like doing a better job than me. And it still creeps me out, but it's really been a big change in the experience to use the platform itself to give AI capabilities, right? So I want to give you a sneak peek of a little bit of like what my life as an engineer sometimes is at Databricks. I have to do research for a bunch of new features or bug analysis all the time. All of our logs and metrics, anonymized, from all of the user activity, goes into Databricks itself actually internally. And then there are things like Jira and tickets, Salesforce information, just a bunch of unstructured / semi-structured, like raw content that usually consists of user feedback, customer issues, escalations, things like that. And of course, there's a lot of code, right? There's a lot of commits, there's a lot of Git, and all of that goes together for me to figure out what happened, what changes were made where. And doing this analysis historically had been a shit ton of work, for lack of a better word. It's like slow, I gotta find things. I love Atlassian, but if you've ever written JQL, the Jira query language, it's sort of a ton of work and a ton of context switching. And actually recently, internally, we've adopted this project called Codename Goose. Anyone in the room from Block, please? Block, the company behind Square and a bunch of other places, recently open sourced this agentic AI tool essentially for developers. And this is something we're using quite a bit internally, and we have it hooked into a bunch of systems. And so Goose is a little AI agent that I use almost every day now that does a ton of this work for me so much faster than I ever could. And it's really been transformative. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why and why we're thinking about this a lot at Databricks, right? And yes, it's trendy to talk about agents and AI, and I know we kind of mentioned it a few times, but it doesn't underscore what a big foundational change this is probably going to be to the entire data industry. It's a lot like moving to the cloud was sort of a big deal. We really do think agents are going to be a big deal for data platforms, right? So historically, we would have had a tech lead, some engineers, junior engineers, and really what we've been saying is, the ratio here, it's like 2 to 1, 1 to 3, pretty small. And with agents, suddenly you have a whole bunch more kind of junior engineer level people, developers, who can do a lot more work. But of course, as many of us have probably read or we studied this great book, The Mythical Man Month, adding more people doesn't actually make anything go faster. If anything, there's a sort of with software engineers and development, there's a communication overhead, right? And it's n square. But so what's missing here is it's usually n squared times k. There's like a fixed constant. Like human beings, when they interact with each other, human voice, has throughput of about 8 kilobits per second. So we can only speak so fast. And so that n square kind of blows up in communication overhead. With agents and software, we're talking about gigabytes a second. The bandwidth, there is no bandwidth limitation. So yes, you have n-square communication as you had a bunch of agents, but they can actually talk really fast with each other because they're not human beings, right? They don't have the same constraints we do. And in some sense, that ends up also creating tons of data. Because there's so many of these things, so much faster, we really do expect as over the next 10 years, the amount of data that's AI generated will far exceed the amount of human generated data. And this is kind of a scary problem we're gonna have to worry about because today, fundamentally, databases and data platforms were designed for human beings, right? They were not designed for AI agents. They were not designed for the scale of data, right? And so just environment isolation and testing, right? When you run a bunch of these agents, they're all gonna fork off and do little things on their own and try it out. That's something that really matters in the AI scale. Being able to provision, just spin up resources quickly, right? You don't need as many approvals. You don't need human beings in the loop. There's a lot more automation. That becomes critical. Costs really matter. If you're gonna get an order of magnitude more usage, you don't wanna have to pay the same amount. You don't have to pay for endless capacity and provisioning. There's a lot more elasticity. And storage, right? You don't wanna make 1 million copies of everything just because you're gonna launch 1 million agents to do the work. And so what happens in these development flows, like what can go wrong is, as we all know, agents hallucinate, right? They're non-deterministic. And the way you solve that is you just essentially parallelize. You do a lot of experiments. You have a lot of these people try a bunch of scenarios, run a bunch of workload queries, get those results, test those results. And then I get to sit there and be like, you're hired and you're fired. It's sort of me deciding all of this hard work, what the output is. But of course, as the number of agents grow, this doesn't scale. So you end up having AI agents judging other AI agents. And if you've had to develop software like this, it's pretty cool. It's very different. You used to think about like, should I use a hash map or a tree? Now you're sort of thinking, do I want a large context LLM or a small context LLM? Do I combine these together? So suddenly, these LLMs and the models become data structures. And you're using them to gauge the results of each other. And you're essentially running a lot of workloads as a side effect. And this is really transforming the way we've been developing software internally at Databricks. It's been changing our experience. And it's sort of an interesting and hard problem we're sort of in the early days of. And what happens is, as these things grow, there's a lot of context, right? We all know about context. The agents themselves need to share information amongst themselves. It's kind of a memoization problem. You don't want to recalculate the same thing over and over again. And so how do you build systems that can handle, let's say, concurrency or the transaction overhead of these shared contexts across all these agents that are trying slightly different things? And the truth is, we don't know, right? These are going to be fundamental changes to the way you all build applications, the way data infrastructure works. And so really, today's infrastructure was sort of driven by data volume. It's like the amount of data coming in. And there's going to be new scale dimensions to this. Performance suddenly isn't about getting results faster. It's, if it runs faster, I can run more test hypotheses, and I'll get more correct answers. And it's really going to shift how we think about a lot of these trade-offs. And so tomorrow's data infrastructure is really going to be driven by AI agents. And so you got to look for database infrastructure that's able to handle that context and that scale. And basically, that's a lot of what's in store for this week, right? So the keynotes start tomorrow and the next day. We're going to talk about some of the ideas and some of the early work we're doing to enable entire new ways of doing infrastructure for this. So you'll hear about fundamental additions to the Lakehouse platform. Of course, this is embargoed because that's tomorrow's keynote, so please don't miss it. You should check it out. I can't tell you any more, but it's going to be very interesting. We're going to announce a bunch more open source projects and contributions, big new fundamental changes to make it easier to get data in and run these systems. But of course, I have to leave it at that, so that's tomorrow. We talked a lot about the governance, right? So once you have all of these things, you have to govern access, and you have to make sure the data and the results are correct. On Thursday, there'll be a lot discussed about this general area, and tons more new first-class AI features and functionality, which I can't tell you about, but on Thursday morning, you can figure it out. So that's everything I had to say. I think it's really exciting to have all of you here at the first Tech Industry Forum. A lot of your peers are going to be doing some talks. There's a great one with Gipit and OneTrust coming up Wednesday. Adipar and team, they're doing something Thursday, and there's a general expo. And most importantly, today at 5 p.m., it's the happy hour. So love to catch all of you outside in the main area here on the second floor to discuss things, drinks, whatever is needed. And right after this session right now, we have another industry forum that's going to come in. It's the health and life sciences one. So if you're interested in that, you're welcome to stay. Otherwise, we'll see all of you at 5 o'clock during happy hour.